left scratching your head at the end of the Ahsoka season finale? I'm sure you're not alone. But don't worry, I've pieced it all together for you. And I have to say, I kind of like where Filoni's headed on this. I mean, especially because I've become a part of the Filonidom. Our numbers are small, but our passion is potent. And I encourage you to come over here too. It's great here. It requires a lot of homework. I haven't even done all the homework. But I think, especially if you like putting together puzzles like we do for Marvel and DC stories, it's a lot of fun over here. I think Filoni could have done a little bit more to piece this together in a very compelling way instead of leaving, I'd say, 60 to 70% of the work for fans to do and for people like myself to do. I mean, I appreciate it. Thanks for making my breakdown video more important, Filoni. But I think if he'd had one more episode, or actually, quite frankly, 8 more episodes, because a typical Filoni animated season is 16 episodes, he could have really done right by this storyline. But instead, he literally half-assed it, because it's half the number of episodes. All right. So speaking of pieces, is Filoni moving his pieces across the board, much like Thrawn himself, into position for the movie? Ahsoka Season 2? Right? Both of them? One or the other? Here are my thoughts on that. Because he has indeed created a fork in the road. Thrawn has indeed returned, and he's all into witches, man. He's gone all in. Setting up camp at Dathomir. I'm like, whoa, you went to Dathomir? Somebody. Again, I think Thrawn feels his future. He's seen his future, and it's witches. It's red. Although, by the way, while Dathomir looks like a very evil planet, it in fact has many clans of witches living on it, some of them good, just like there are different, good and bad, and all in between, wielders of the Force, who are Jedi. Witches also tap into the Force, and they're on the spectrum as well. I think this is real complicated, but it's fun. Again, it's more pieces for a puzzle. It's like when you get that puzzle with 1,000 pieces, you're like, bring it on. So anyway, he has the great mothers in tow. As we learn in this finale, he actually woke up in the other galaxy. They weren't just killing time over there for centuries. They had taken a nap. They're well rested and ready for trouble. I have my theory as to who's in the boxes. I think it's witches. All right, but on the note of waking up the mothers, who tells us this? Ezra, and that is sloppy writing, because he's like, oh yeah, I know all about what's going on over here. And you're like, really? Then why were you asking so many darn questions for the past 2 episodes, Ezra? And also, if he thought that Sabine had not yet run into Thrawn, wouldn't one of the first things he'd do be like, don't go over there, there'll be witches over there? I mean, why had that not come up? Why was he just suddenly like, oh yeah, I know all about that? I was like, come on. And also, speaking of witches and Dathomir, this is where Darth Maul is from, and Asajj Ventress, starting to notice a look for Dathomir. And there are different clans, as I said, different clans of witches on Dathomir as well. So maybe sometime in, the Filoni movie or Ahsoka Season 2, we'll meet all these people. All right. Now, the other path, I said it's a fork in the road. So when is Thrawn back in the original, the Star Wars main galaxy, right, with witches? So on the other side, I was right. Baylan Skoll has no interest in going home, at least not yet, as it seems that this galaxy is actually the location of Mortis. Ooh, what's Mortis? Many of you, I'm sure, are asking. Well, that is almost like the Garden of Eden of the Force, and I'll be sure to explain all of this in just a moment and how it actually ties into Anakin Skywalker. This is actually, as I said, if you get into this stuff as I have, you're like, oh, this is actually pretty good. But I wish the episode had really spelled it out and maybe moved a couple more steps in this direction so it could be a little bit more exciting. And basically instead of getting this new storyline going, they just really barely teased it. They kissed it just a little, and that's just not enough for a season finale. I can't tell you when I clicked on it last night how my heart dropped when I saw it was only about 40 or a little under 40 minutes. I was like, that's not enough time for how much you have left to do. All right, so speaking of all this mythology, a lot of Clone Wars fans, I saw you on social media last night. I mean, you are just so excited to dive even further into the lore of Star Wars. And that's great. I'm so happy that you're excited. But I don't know how many of you there are, right? It's like how some people really loved Andor, but yet the ratings were still, like same thing. I mean, we'll see how Ahsoka's ratings eventually shake out, but right now it's not headed in the right direction after 2 weeks. So in my opinion, the return of Thrawn, the heir to the Empire, as he's known in Star Wars canon and the fans, thanks to that book title, which they're now quoting all over the place, that to me is a movie level storyline, right? You have him go up against the New Republic. He's bringing back the Empire together. That's going to eventually become the First Order. We've been seeing that happening in The Mandalorian season 3 and Andor is earlier. But, still you're seeing all these, they're really focusing. What are they focusing on in live action Star Wars right now? Cloning. And the return, well, now they've added some new stuff like witches to the board, but so far they've been focusing on cloning and bringing back the Empire and how those remnants are still there. So then there can be lots of fighting. I think this is a somewhat easy storyline to grasp, right? And you've got Ezra back now on this side. You throw the Dins in there, you got great stuff. Then for Ahsoka season 2, that's where I'd explore the Mortis stuff. You need more than a movie. I mean, the live action Star Wars series still aren't enough episodes, but they're more time than a movie. Maybe this makes me feel like Ahsoka season 2 has to come out before the Filoni movie, because I'll explain to you why in a moment. But on Ahsoka season 2, you explore this Mortis storyline, which I gotta say again, is real inside baseball. Like, bless Filoni's heart, he makes his fans so happy, as I said, but there just aren't enough of them. I guess, here's my thinking. I could see that maybe this could be all part of Filoni's Lord of the Rings style movie, right? With a big battle happening in one galaxy, whereas in the other galaxy, there's this spiritual storyline happening simultaneously. And then once some people power up to Mortis level, some characters, right, they can collide for the finale. Because I would guess that once you get that ability, you would have the power to travel between galaxies without a hyperdrive or any Purgle. How are Ahsoka and Sabine, etc., going to get home? I'll tell you how. They're going to become Mortis Gods, probably. Wait till you hear how this could potentially play out. If you weren't excited before, I think I can make you at least a little excited. So that's, I saw Ahsoka, all Mortis stuff. She's already Ahsoka the White. Now she just needs to glow. She'll pop back over to the other galaxy on her own accord, and she'll just make everything. She'll be like, haha, Thrawn. And I think she's going to maybe come back with Anakin. Oh, this is going to be good. But first, I just want to talk about some of the flaws of Filonidom. I got some notes for Filoni. And I think even if you're a huge Filoni fan, you got to agree that I'm right on this to some degree. Because I think a lot of what happened in the season finale is just going to go right over the head of OG trilogy Star Wars fans and casual Star Wars fans. Mortis and the Mortis Gods, I bet a ton of you didn't even know what these references were, much less what the depth of them. Ahsoka's Owl, which is also tied to the Mortis Gods, I'm sure a number of you were like, what the heck is this? And even Dathomir, when they showed up to that red planet at the end, I think for a lot of people, that doesn't register. They didn't even say on the bottom, oh, we're at Dathomir, like they usually do in Star Wars. They were just like, oh, they know. And you're like, I think most people don't. And by the way, when Morgan Elspeth got that flaming green sword, I was like, holy CGI, we're getting awfully far afield of Star Wars here. So how far can you push Star Wars before it's no longer Star Wars? It's no longer recognizable to the fandom, right? I mean, there's always going to be a part of the fandom that are like, yes, give me more. I love expanding this. But I think there are a lot of people who are like, this is not what I signed up for. It's more work than I signed up for. No, thank you. Speaking of Morgan Elspeth and Sabine, for two women who risked it all to save men that they wanted to have in their lives, they sure ended up getting the short end of the stick, or in Morgan's case, the sharp end of the stick. Woohoo! I mean, and no guys. They're both guileless. In the end, Ahsoka was basically, when she looked at Sabine, she was like, I don't think you and Ezra are going to work out. It's like when you talk to your friend and you're like, I know you really like this guy, but I mean, it's just getting ridiculous at this point. I think you need to move on. So apparently no good deed goes unpunished, even in the world of Star Wars. So if you could bring OG and casual Star Wars fans on board the Filoniverse, as I said, I don't really think they necessarily want to come on board. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. And please say what camp you're in. Because I don't think this is Star Wars to a lot of people. I think Star Wars actually works best when it's simple. Look at the original trilogy, which was almost like, Sword in the Stone, but, in space. Or Mandalorian, which is like an old-time Western, but in space. And Filoni likes his Star Wars very, very complicated. And again, as I said, the more complex you make a story, the more niche it becomes. Just ask Westworld. Also, Filoni still hasn't learned, as I said, live-action pacing. He, and to some degree Favreau, who learned from Filoni, they're writing these live-action shows as if they have the full 16 episodes of an animated season. So they can take it slow, and then you can build your way up to what's been... every time I watch a Filoni animated season, they always have a two-parter season finale at the end, which is fantastic. So that's why Ahsoka, I said, feels like the first half of a season instead of a full season. Because that's very much what it felt like with this season finale. This felt like a mid-season break. That's why so many people, I think, yesterday were like, how long are we going to have to wait for this story to get continued? Because we know how slow Star Wars and Marvel are now, partially because of problems internally. And then, and also they're second guessing themselves. And then also they have too many characters and stuff to do on the bench too now, and not enough money because this stuff's also expensive because it's in live action. Animation, Filoni could move a lot faster. He could afford to have a smaller audience because, it was cheaper to make the show. But now, are enough people interested in complex discussions about the Force and therefore, to some extension, religion and military strategy to warrant approximately $100 million price tag per season? It's like how George Lucas really wanted to explore politics in the prequels, and while sure, some people ended up digging it, not as many as who dug the original trilogy. But enough about Star Wars' potential future. Let's focus on this season finale, what has been revealed, the elements that have been set in motion, and of course my own thoughts on what we hath witnessed. And I'd love to hear your own thoughts down below. I did enjoy seeing Thrawn sweat. I thought that was great as Ahsoka got closer and closer. That was awesome. Although many times during the episode I was like, we don't have time for this ceremony. The clock's a ticking. It so often happens with all Disney live action shows recently. You're taken out of it because you have this outer ticking clock instead of because I don't think they do a good enough job setting up the internal ticking clock. And I think we've lost some of our faith in the creative teams, which is interesting. I never felt that way when I was watching my first 4 Loki screeners, by the way, which is interesting. All right, so but Thrawn started to sweat. And it was nice to see an officer of the Empire finally realize that the good guys are a genuine threat instead of just brushing them off as usual. I even love that Thrawn acknowledged that with a line of dialogue saying that he himself had made the same mistake, falling victims to the heroics of a single Jedi, when Ezra, of course, had taken him via Purgle to this new galaxy and stranded him there for a decade. I thought that was great. Perhaps Thrawn, not only is he a great strategist, but perhaps he's the first Star Wars villain to be able to learn from his mistakes. That would make him very dangerous and unique indeed. So what is in those boxes? What's in the box? Some of us originally thought it might be Thrawn's dead stormtroopers, now night troopers, but after they already animated some night troopers here, it doesn't seem that hard. Why would you be putting them in boxes, right? By the way, the zombie night troopers were even more ineffectual than living stormtroopers, which you never think would be possible. You'd think they were pretty much as dumb as dirt when they were alive, but they got even dumber. But so therefore, I think the boxes are probably witches. Maybe Thrawn and his troops dug them up, and there seems so much more now. I was like, boy, that digital model from last week was not at all to scale. I can see why it took so long to load them up. But I think maybe Thrawn and his troops dug up all these witches after they awakened the 3 mothers, and maybe they need more magic mojo on Dathomir to wake them all up. Maybe that's why they went to Dathomir. And so it was hilarious, by the way, when they turned Morgan into a zombie, pledging her loyalty and her life. I like the alliteration there. I thought that was, that was pretty good. The ceremony took way too long. And I was like, you're going to really regret this, Morgan. Morgan needed a best friend. Or, have you ever seen those Shakespeare gay best friend sketches to be like, girl, you're crazy. But so she did that. And then later, the 3 mothers walked right past her and were like, oh no, we're going back with Thrawn. Have fun here by yourself, right? It was just, it's fitting that this episode aired on October 3rd, which is Mean Girls Day. And I liked Thrawn's goodbye to Ahsoka. Open up a channel. Not only a chance to gloat, which I think was tactical, by the way. And so again, Thrawn was being a little more Thrawny here. I liked it this episode. I think he gloated to take the wind out of her sails and make her feel already defeated, which he did. You could feel her kind of slowing down. She was like, I'm not going to make it. And you're like, put the pedal to the metal. You might. He's trying to psych you out. She needs a best friend too there. That's what Sabine is supposed to be doing. But anyway, I also think Thrawn talked to Ahsoka as a sign of respect to a worthy opponent. And it ends up that he is correct. Ahsoka does belong in this other galaxy. So let's discuss this, which is actually really huge. But it's so weird that it's such a big development for the world of Star Wars, yet probably 60 to 70% of the overall Star Wars audience watching this show totally didn't get it. You know, it just totally went over their heads and they didn't understand the importance of it. It's insane. And I think it's a little bit of the fault of the show. You could say, well, people should go back and watch all the Clone Wars and the Rebels episodes. I mean, I watched Rebels and I loved it, but Clone Wars is too much. But, you know, the show, I think if you want to transition to a bigger audience, they have some culpability in catching people up, quite frankly. But anyway, so Mortis, as I said, is believed to be like the Garden of Eden of the Force. It's like the origin of the Force. And its location was previously unknown, thought to be in another galaxy. And where do we find ourselves in this season of Ahsoka? In another galaxy. Oh, we found it! Previously, Mortis was home to the Mortis Gods, the Father, the Daughter, and the Son. The daughter represented the light side of the Force, the Jedi basically. The son, the dark side of the Force, the Sith basically, while the father represented balance between the two and made sure there was order. There's also Abeloth, basically the mother. You know, you have a father, you got a mother. And she was known as the bringer of chaos, the opposite of order. Get it? Right? So the children are the light and the dark side, and the parents are order and chaos. But so far, by the way, Filoni hasn't used Abeloth, in fact, in his animated shows, whereas he has used the Father, the Daughter, and the Son. Oh boy, has he! Wait till you hear this stuff. So I actually was first introduced to the Mortis Gods in the season finale of Rebels, or the final season of Rebels, where artwork of them guarded the doorway to the world between worlds at the Jedi Temple in Lothal, and the artwork actually became like almost alive and moved. It was very cool. So when we saw Baylan Skoll on those rocks, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. But again, if you haven't even seen Rebels or Clone Wars, you have no idea what the significance of those figures is. So that's supposed to be like an amazing moment with the father pointing in the direction of something that I believe is the entrance to Mortis. But, most people wouldn't get that at all. Not even an inkling. By the way, how did Baylan get a cape back? I was like, where'd you get that cape? And why does it seem so much bigger and more majestic? He's like, I gotta look good for Abeloth. I think he's after Abeloth, quite frankly. I'll discuss with you. But there's a little bit more I gotta catch you up on first. So, oh boy. Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan actually have been to Mortis, transported there during the Clone Wars series. I only learned this last night when I was trying to make heads or tails of the season finale. So it was here that the father sought to prove that Anakin was the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force, much like the father himself does. Now, long story short, things went south with some internal fighting. This family, like many families, doesn't really quite get along. And the father, the daughter, and the son all ended up being killed. Mostly by themselves. I think Anakin killed the son. But basically, in fact, although before the daughter died, who represents the light, the Jedi, she transferred at least some of her essence to Ahsoka. Get it? Oh, do you see where this is starting to go? So that's the significance of the owl, by the way. That's either the daughter's pet or perhaps the daughter reincarnated herself as an owl, who has been showing up around Ahsoka ever since that happened, as both a sign and sometimes to help her or to help others to help Ahsoka. Like, for instance, in The World Between Worlds, it was this owl who helped Ezra find the right doorway to save Ahsoka's life in her fight against Vader, where she was supposed to have died. And while Anakin, of course, failed to bring order to the Force when he was alive, maybe he was never meant to do that. Maybe he was meant to walk both the path of the Jedi and the Sith, as we saw referenced in Episode 5, and then after being both things, once he passed on, he would become a Mortis God who would then bring balance. Oh, right? Is that why we see Anakin's Force ghost at the end of the season finale? Usually Force ghosts are just there to give advice and comfort. Be like, hey, what's up? Don't feel bad. We're still here, kind of. But perhaps even in death, Anakin's journey is not over. Maybe he's not just everybody took it as like he's always going to back up Ahsoka, but maybe he's got unfinished business too. So do we have a new Trinity? Get it, a Trinity, right? Real life religious metaphor we got going on here. But Anakin to take over for the father, Ahsoka to take over for the daughter, and then who takes over for the son? I was going to say maybe Baylan, but I think that's too small potatoes for him. I think, again, I agree he's probably after Abeloth, the Chaos Bringer. So would Shin Hati be a candidate for the son? I mean, she's certainly a wild card because Ahsoka has already offered to help her. So she's kind of like being torn between both sides. Maybe she'll end up being a test, right? But then this is where things get really like, oh my goodness, all the pieces start to click. What about Sabine for the son, right? We learned here in the season finale that the reason Ahsoka didn't want to train her was actually because Ahsoka fears that there is a darkness in Sabine after what happened to Sabine's family. Also, her poor studying skills also show a little bit of the dark side. She's like, she's so bad at following directions, she's got to be part Sith. So I think that starts to make a lot of sense, quite frankly. Speaking of Baylan Skoll, poor Ray Stevenson, he of course tragically passed away in real life. So my guess is that considering how important Baylan Skoll is to this story, I mean, he could pass away between seasons, but I think that would not help the story. I think clearly he's a crucial player. I would recast the role, and I think that would be okay. So anyway, if Anakin and Ahsoka and maybe Sabine level up to Mortis Gods, I imagine they could really help out against Thrawn, as I said. So, and by the way, why does Thrawn keep bringing up Anakin Skywalker? It's getting a little conspicuous, don't you think? I think there has to be a writing reason for that. So will it be Anakin who ultimately takes him down? I mean, it was Anakin who took out the Emperor as Vader, right? Although that didn't stick. But, again, maybe we could just disavow that because all this other stuff really starts to come together. Other thoughts about the season finale. I think it's pretty crazy that Ahsoka, who's supposed to be a top Jedi at this point, has had such a difficult time again and again and again winning a fight. She couldn't take on Baylan twice. And here, she really struggled going up against Morgan. I was like, I don't think Ahsoka can defeat anybody, quite frankly. I mean, she defeated Morgan back when we saw her on The Mandalorian, right? And Ahsoka does kill her here. But boy, did it take a lot of work. It shouldn't have been that hard. Especially, I mean, we all saw her take out Merrick. How did she do that and then suddenly get so bad otherwise? I do think it was Ahsoka's best fight to date. She was a little faster here. Either Rosario Dawson or her stunt double was. But still, the live-action lightsaber action is nowhere near as good as it's been in animation. For all the characters, they really got to work on that. They really have to be like, why does the lightsaber action look so much better in the animated series? And how can we translate that to live action? Filoni is very interested in Jedi and the Force, particularly through the religious lens. And seeing 3 Jedi working together here was interesting. That's right, I'll upgrade Sabine from 2.5 Jedi. She does seem to have leveled up very quickly, I might add. I mean, I thought for sure she was going to let Ezra fall and be killed. And it looked like it did, which I thought that was hilarious. Although, by the way, also when she and Ezra jumped off the end of the temple and the night troopers, the zombie night troopers thought they were dead. I was like, how many times in Star Wars does someone have to jump off a cliff for the characters who were chasing them to realize that they jumped on top of like a spaceship or something? I mean, it's happened so many times at this point. You're like, how is this not something that everybody's, they know what's going on already? But I did think, I was like, I knew it wouldn't happen, but I was like, what if she dropped him? That'd be hilarious. And so Sabine. All right, so was it cool or silly when they all held their hands out to open the temple door? I forgot what it was. There was something recently where they were like, oh yeah, you just make this motion and it just fixes it. That was happening somewhere recently. What was it? Can you remember? That's what that reminded me of though, where you're like, oh, just do this and it'll fix it. Where was that? It's driving me crazy, but that's what this reminded me of. Like, just put your hand out and we'll fix everything. I was like, Sabine, come on. Sabine hasn't been able to do squat. All right, so I did enjoy, though, Ahsoka finally getting to fight alongside a Jedi who knows what they're doing, Ezra. And their tag teaming to take out those night troopers was pretty cool. You know, when Ezra used the Force to push them, and then Ahsoka got him with the double cut. I was like, nice move. And Ezra, yes, he got a lightsaber, one modeled after his late master, Kanan Jarrus. Even from the hilt to the color of the saber. So that was nice. And it was really great to see Ezra tinkering on the ship and playing around with the night troopers, right? Not only was that like very much his behavior on Star Wars Rebels, but it was very much like a Star Wars Rebel character in all the movies. So that was kind of fun to have that playfulness back again. I wish they'd explained how Ezra got off of Thrawn's Star Destroyer unnoticed once they returned to this galaxy. Surely Thrawn and his men would notice a small ship taking off, right? They're like, bloop, 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 bloop. They're like, who do you think that is? Clearly Ezra. I mean, here's what I would have done if I were Ezra. I would have disabled the tracking device, and then I would have pushed the ship out. I would have had it float out of the Star Destroyer as it went towards Dathomir. I'd just be, because they've done that move on Rebels. So you stay engine silent, you don't have any of your electricity on, you wait till you get out of range, then you fire it up just a little bit and get out of there. That I would have bought. That's how I would have bought. I mean, sure, one of the ships would have gone offline, but maybe they were like, we're having such a good time that we're back home. We're not going to mention it to Thrawn or something. Maybe, or they were having maybe they were having like an office party on the Star Destroyer and they didn't see it. But as is, I mean, and that would have given Ezra a really nice moment, by the way. You'd be like, cool, look at him. He's back to his old tricks. How awesome is that? But instead, you're just like, how did they not notice that this ship is missing? It just doesn't make any sense. It was nice to see him back with Hera, though. And did he get a haircut, or did he just have helmet hair? I almost wish that he would have shaved while he was on that ship, so that when he took the helmet off, he looked even more like Ezra from the animated series. That would have been nice. But clearly, he's been brought to, speaking of maneuvering pieces on the board, he's been brought to Hera so he can train her and Kanan's son, Jason, who we all know is quite force sensitive. Thank you very much. Now, the Master-Padawan bond, a big deal in Star Wars, particularly to Filoni, because he says, some say, I had in my notes that some say, but who are we kidding? Filoni likes to say he's George Lucas's Padawan, for better or worse. So anyway, Anakin, I really like Filoni's storytelling, but I do think that he's making this franchise not as broad in its appeal. So like my creative fan hat loves what Filoni's doing, even though I'm not as entrenched as some of you. But my business hat is like, this is not good. This is a mistake. Turn around. We got some problems here. Or Filoni, can you adapt it a little bit to widen the appeal? All right, so speaking of Masters and Padawans, you've got Anakin and Ahsoka, then continuing the line with Sabine, who I guess is also a little problematic, right? As they've pointed out. Ezra and Jason, potentially. And I guess there's Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. And maybe they're not doing as well, because they're not together right now, because they're on the dark side. Although I like seeing the same dedication on the dark side and how it's been warped by that. Like when I was watching Rebels, Darth Maul wanting Ezra to be his apprentice was a really interesting wrinkle. I thought that was really cool. Ezra, by the way, has some dark side tendencies, if you didn't know. And again, as I said, we learned that's why Ahsoka didn't want to train Sabine. So maybe that's why also they maybe are drawn to each other. But anyway, because Sabine's family was killed in the siege of Mandalore, Sabine would use the Force for revenge. Ezra's parents also were killed. They're both orphans at this point. And therefore, Sabine would be tempted to go to the dark side. And so honestly, while I still like Sabine as a character, I just really don't like her as a Jedi. The character literally has no interest in being a Jedi. Whenever she does something Jedi-y, it's because she has to, right? Like she doesn't really want to do it, I don't think. I'm interested in Anakin and Ahsoka's path. But with Sabine, I only think she becomes interesting if she were to take the place of the Son in the Trinity. And so since that's the only reason I think to leave her here. And since she has been left behind, that makes me feel even stronger that this is the direction they're headed in. So that's my breakdown of the season finale of Ahsoka. What do you think? Particularly now that I might have filled in more of the blank spaces for you. Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.